Willey is a trial lawyer and also known as a politico here in Charleston. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with him one-on-one. Roy!
Hey Quintin.
It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you.
I appreciate this.
Absolutely. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Well, here we sit, at your home, and, the obvious right now is about James Comey being fired by President Trump.
Right.
President Trump actually said this to Lester Holt of NBC News, quote, "I was going to fire Comey, my decision." And he says this regardless of the Justice Department's recommendation. Tell me, what do you think the recommendation that is should have been?
Well, I think that it's a complex question. Obviously, the FBI director needs to have the confidence of the president. In this case, however, I'm not sure that President Trump did not use the recommendations that he got as a way to impede the Russia investigation, which, as you know, is ongoing and is important, and our Senator, Lindsey Graham, a Republican, has been promoting and pushing. So in this particular case, I don't think that there was any evidence that Director Comey was doing a bad job or anything of that sort, and so the president's decision is a little bit troubling.
As a matter of fact, he said this, quote, about James Comey, quote, "He's a showboat, he's a grandstander. The FBI has been in turmoil." What is your definition of James Comey and the FBI right now?
Well, again, it's a complex question because, of course, we had the events that occurred just before the November election,
right.
Which we have seen and heard since were done at least in part because Director Comey was concerned about the appearance, if Hillary Clinton had won the election, of having some favoritism by not notifying the public that that investigation was ongoing. Of course, we know that there were investigations into Russia and to Trump that were not brought forward, and so that's concerning. There's certainly some question about the timing, why he made some of the decisions that he did. Some of those things we may never have the answer to. I think it's encouraging that Director Comey has agreed to testify again and has demanded that that testimony be in public. And I think that's encouraging not only for the state of American affairs to put some of these questions to rest, but also in terms of his character and his integrity to say, I'm willing to be questioned and testify publicly about these things, essentially saying I have nothing to hide.
Speaking of Russia and Trump, let's go to that. President Trump said to NBC News about the rumors that, quote, "It is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election." In your mind, what is fact and what is fiction about this story?
Well, in my mind, most of the story, as far as the investigation goes, the connections, is fact. I mean, we have factual basis to know that General Flynn, who was, of course, a part of President Obama's team and was eventually let go, President Obama counseled then President-elect Trump that he was not a good individual to have as part of his team. And we know that he received actual payment from the Russian government. We have as soon as last week, Jared Kushner's brother, I believe it was, or some family associate in his company in Russia, or in China, excuse me, indicating that we had this sort of golden visa opportunity, and so essentially trading influence for money. I mean, we have those connections. In terms of the election, I think we often forget in the story that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. Okay, she was America's choice. The Electoral College cost her the election, as it has individuals in the past. And so the question is, what interference, if any, did Russia have in those particular states and those particular races? And that's a question that's ongoing and that we're constantly looking into. I mean, we know there were some hacks. We know that. We know that emails were released, which of course were damaging to the Clinton campaign. And I think the fundamental question that we have to answer through this investigation is, what did Donald Trump's campaign know? When did it know it? And what did it do to essentially assist the Russians in interfering in our electoral process? Because we know that they interfered. Okay. And so the question is, what did the Trump campaign do or not do to prevent it, if in fact they knew about it?
On the Russian investigation, the president told NBC News, quote, "I want that thing to be absolutely done properly." Why is that a thing Why is that thing a thing in your eyes?
Well, it's a thing because his team created it, and essentially through talking with the Russians and giving the Russians information, created a thing, so to speak. And I think that anybody who has ever been under active investigation would want for it to be over. So the president's statement in that regard is not surprising. Of course he wants it to be over. But I think it's important for the American people and frankly for the world that the investigation continue and that we get to the bottom of it.
Gas tax. This headline appeared in the Post and Courier newspaper on May 10th. Quote, "It's official. South Carolina has a new gas tax after the South Carolina House and Senate overrid Governor McMaster's veto." If you could edit that in headline, what would you add to that?
Well, I think critical, the word critical, it's a critical gas tax. And of course we never like to see the taxes go up or be increased on our citizens, but at some point the crisis, in this case the state of our state's roads and infrastructure, becomes so dire that we have to take dire acts, and in this case it's raising the gas tax. I will point out that I think that one of the critical pieces of the legislation is the rebate to our working citizens through the Earned Income Tax Credit. Right. And of course the working poor in this state are the folks who will be hit the hardest, frankly, by a gas tax if there were not this provision in place, because no matter how much you make per hour or where you work, a gallon of gas costs you the same. And a lot of times folks in our rural communities have to travel farther for work and have to spend more. I read a statistics, it's about $553 a month the average working person in South Carolina spends on transportation, getting back and forth to work. That's substantial. And so I think the Earned Income Tax Credit is an important component to that, to make sure that that money comes back to our working class citizens, and that frankly, a lot of the tourists are going to be the ones bearing a lot of the cost for this, and that's okay. I think that's okay. I think people that can afford to go, out of state on vacation and, pay a little bit more for gas and cut our working class folks a break is a good thing.
Roy Willey, I went on your LinkedIn page just recently, and under experience it says, quote, "Trial lawyer, Anastapulu Law Firm LLC, 2013 present, 4 years." You said something that strikes me very interesting, actually, because you said this describing your career, quote, "I aim to give the little guy or gal a fighting chance. Every case is a cause." Tell me, what has it been like for you to be fighting the case for every little gal and every little guy?
Well, it's been humbling in a lot of ways. A lot of what I do is catastrophic injury work, wrongful death work when people's loved ones have been killed through no fault of their own. And you get to see, frankly, a lot of the worst situations that people have gone through in their lives. And, you get to help them through that on a one-on-one relationship. And, every case really does become a cause, because I believe if you do it right, which I try to, I'm not perfect, but your clients become like your family in those situations. And a lot of times you're talking about this legal maneuver or that legal maneuver, but really what you're talking about at its base is how to make someone's life better. And you can never replace a loved one. You can never put an arm back on once it's been lost, but you can give somebody some hope that some part of that circumstance or situation can be fixed. And so that's what I try to do. And I hope that my clients would say I do it well.
Yes, indeed. And let me go back to that again, because you said this, quote, "Every case is a cause." So what's next for Roy Willey as a trial lawyer?
Well, another day. I'm in court pretty much every week, and I have some hearings this week. And so each day, you're really looking at a unique set of circumstances. And unlike in politics, for example, we were talking earlier about the gas tax, where you're working on a bill for a long period of time or advocating for a bill which affects a large number of people. In most of my cases affect a small group of people, maybe even only one person. And so every day is different, and every case is different, every cause is different. But my aim is every day to wake up and bring the fight to the companies that injure folks, and to give the little guy and gal, as I said apparently in that description, a fighting chance, and to give them the best representation that I can give them. That's my calling.
Speaking of which, Akeem Nastapulo, what is it like for you to work for him?
He's a great guy, role model, father figure in a lot of ways. So godfather to our new son, Penn, and has taught me everything I know about the practice of law, and a lot of what I know about working with people as individuals. And it's a really rewarding career, but there's also a challenge to make sure you're finding that work-life balance, because every case being a cause in and of itself sort of says the problem in a lot of ways, which is it's easy to spend all of your time on your career. And Akeem, of course, having two daughters who he's raised with his wife Constance, has provided an example about how to make sure you're striking that balance, providing the best representation, but also, as you're raising a child, we now have a 7.5-month-old Penn, how to strike that balance and make sure that you're doing your best, for your family and your cause, not just the cases that you're working on.
You now have a 7-month-old son. You have a wife. You have a driving career. What's next for Roy Willey?
Well, I hope to just be able to wake up every day and keep doing what I'm doing. Of course, remain active in the community.
Sure.
And in public affairs, and I intend to continue doing that. I sort of look at it as two tracks, civic life and a professional life, and I think they overlap in a lot of ways. Politics, of course, and the things that I do there, and helping elected officials and helping people who want to be elected officials, move the ball forward for large groups of people. Okay. And in my professional life, I move the ball down the field for individuals and for smaller groups of people. And so I think that the great purpose of life is to do as much for others as you can with the talents and time that you're given. And that's what I intend to do until I have no more time left.
Roy Willey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thanks, Quintin.
Thank you.
It's great.
Yes, sir.